Night shift. The night shift. The night shift. The night shift. Listening to the Night Shift podcast. You're listening to the Night Shift podcast. I'm your host, Zachary C. Brady.
And I am your other host, Tristan R.R. Blum.
So this is the Night Shift's first podcast.
The very first one.
First ride out.
And the first shift.
The first
this
night
is
shift.
this is it.
The first night shift.
I'm sorry, I'm just really knocking out the jokes.
That's okay. If you're new to... You're all going to be new. All of you are going to be new to this because it's a new podcast. But if you like the podcast, if you thought it was interesting, if you want to hear more content like this, go ahead and follow the podcast on Spotify, add it to your podcasts on Stitcher, add it to your shows on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Right. Follow, because we're going to be pumping out quite a lot more in the coming months. And,
I mean, there's also the day shift. I don't know if we want to mention that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So we're actually going to launch another show parallel to this one called The Day Shift, a night shift podcast. And it's going to be not about film. I mean, we might include subjects of film, but like, why don't you talk about some of the things you're...
It's good. I mean, I'm going to bring up like three things: Star Wars, video games, and good wine. I'm just kidding. No, I'm going to talk about like way more than that.
I mean, why not? Why not those things?
Well, yeah. I mean, like, because...
It'll be about whatever we want, right?
Let's face it. Like, I'm an illustrator. I mean, visual artist. I haven't really done a lot with film, and I'm getting into this because I met you a couple months ago, and you're like, oh, hey, you do well at this. I'm like, no, I don't. No, I won't. And then here I am. And during the day shift, that's going to be like the only time where I can really get into things unrelated to film, but also like get to be all passionate and like what would be the word for it? Just, I guess, lost in my interests.
Yeah, no, a lot of cool stuff. Subscribe to the Night Shift podcast. Subscribe to the Day Shift, a podcast by the Night Shift, and keep an eye out on our YouTube channel for sketches and short films. We actually have one coming up called C'est l'amour, which is spelled CESTLAMORT. So, kind of like C'est la vie, but it's mort instead of V. It says V is life, right? And mort is death.
Right.
So it's such as death.
Exactly.
It's really cool. I'm not going to talk about any more of it because we're going to let the trailers and stuff speak for itself. But keep an eye out for that stuff. It's really, really cool. Tristan acts in it. He speaks French. Bonjour. Today we have some wonderful guests who recently have released a film titled "Sleep Hath Its Own World." It's I would call it a mood piece.
Artsy.
It's artsy fartsy.
It makes you feel a lot when you watch it.
It's got really hauntingly beautiful visuals. Like the opening, there's an opening sequence with like the mirror and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like like when he's dancing in front of the mirror and stuff, and it's like, it's very cool. Very, very cool.
I got Mr. Handsome, who just takes the show in the entire. Yeah.
I mean, both of the dancers are like stunning, but like they're stunningly great at dancing.
Well, he's the first person you see, so that's the only that's the impression I was left with. It's not. I'm not saying like, oh, he's the only good-looking person in this entire film. No, they're both stunning, like you said.
Okay.
So nice. Yeah.
Fair enough. But yeah, we get to interview my friend Carlo Rosillo and his friend and producer, directing partner, Alison Pogorelc. I said it right.
Yeah, you did.
Pogorelc. Alison Pogorelc and Carlo Rosillo. Carlo is a cinematographer from the Milwaukee area. He does a lot of broadcast. He does stuff in broadcast with WISN 12, but then he also does professional cinematography work for like businesses, local businesses, and the like, and organizations.
Really industrious guy. That's all I can say. He's closer to you, but I mean,
He's always busy. Always busy. It's nearly impossible to get him to do anything, and that's not because he doesn't want to. He legitimately is just always working.
Yeah.
But like that's a good thing. I think it's good. That means that they're doing something right in my eyes.
Right.
And Alison is also always busy. We were actually lucky to get what we did get with Alison because she is like booked every day, all week. She barely even had time to meet Carlo for coffee, I think. But yeah, in any case, I had the pleasure of working on the project with them. They Carlo asked me to gaff for him, and that was really fun, getting to work with Carlo. Getting to work with a lot of cool toys, big steady cam and 300-watt lights.
Oh, he knows his equipment.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had a lot, but he also rented a lot. Not a lot, but enough. And we got to play with Vazen anamorphics, which to you, I know that doesn't mean anything.
What'd you call me?
Exactly. I actually hadn't even heard of Vazen. I'm not a cinematographer myself, so like I don't know like
420 blaze it. That's what
Well, the lenses themselves, I think each one, either the whole set or each one, I can't remember, is worth like $10,000 a piece.
Wow.
Either the whole set of lenses was worth $10,000, or each lens was like roughly $10,000 each. Really expensive lenses, but like overall, and we got to shoot in like these amazing settings, like at the David Arnett Art Gallery, which one piece of art, like a small like 4x5 like thing hanging on the wall, could be worth like $10,000, $8,000, whatever. And that's just one thing in a gigantic like house just filled to the brim. Like you literally have to avoid tripping over some of these art pieces because there's just so many.
Yeah, when you watch that video, you're like, oh my god, are they gonna touch them? Is it all right? And it's just fine because it's well choreographed. I mean, is that just about everything that you wanted to recount?
I think it is. I think we can jump into the interview.
All right. Well, enjoy the silky smooth, like hot chocolate, the voices of Carlo and Alison.
You're listening to the Night Shift Podcast.
To introduce people to the podcast because I have to like pretend there's somebody listening.
Oh, are we doing it right now?
Oh yeah, we're doing it right now.
Oh, nice, cool.
Oh wow.
So this is Alison. I'm gonna butcher your last name. How do you say your last name?
I was gonna have you try it.
I should remember this part of the podcast. Like, I'll take this part and then I'll just save it because I still don't know.
You should.
Okay. Pogorelc.
That's
Pogorelc.
honestly very, very close. Very close.
How do you say it?
Pogorelc.
Pogorelc. And then the other director / cinematographer, Carlo Rosillo.
Rosillo.
I know.
Oh, okay. So you were intentionally
absolutely
angering me.
That's the name of the game, man.
Well, it's also John Carlo Rosillo, the two first names.
But you go by Carlo.
Yeah, I do go by Carlo, though.
Bringing Tristan into the conversation. Tristan is he's a good friend of mine. He's trying to get into the acting thing. He's an artist in his own way. He's kind of new to the film thing, but he's like an illustrator, hardcore, and he's also a musician. He has his own band, and he's got like 3 or 4 albums or whatever. You want to bring the mic closer to you? Well, I mean, that's kind of like the name of the game, right? With filmmaking, is kind of have to learn how to do it all, or
unless you're like one of those pretentious film students that's like, I'm only a director.
Well, but
then they don't get jobs.
That was something that I liked. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a world in which like you have to be like. There are people that spread themselves too thin, and then I think they want to be everything, and then nothing is that good.
That's true.
But I did like one things I caught during the Oscars was the like directors had little intros where they were talking about like what is directing, and it's kind of like a lot of bullshit. But
Well, it's
one of
funny because
them-
most of them didn't know what to say.
right. But one of them said you're a jack of all trades and a master of none.
That's
and
true.
I thought that was like a really decent like pass at trying to explain what it is, because you really are like, you have to kind of have your feet in like many different pools, but but you are certainly not the authority on like most of them. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how it's been with me. I mean, I've just getting my feet wet directing the past couple months, and I mean, I am a musician, audio engineer. I like to play with cameras. I like to think I have a decent eye for photography, but like I'm not a cinematographer. I'm not an audio. I'm not a sound recordist. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not. I'm not a lot of things, but like I think it's coming through that like you have to dip into what you do know to like show people this is what I'm after. Can you make with the thing?
Yeah.
Tristan knows all about that because he's been helping me storyboard, and it's been fantastic working with an illustrator. By the way, if you ever want to do something in the future with Tristan, I'm sure he'd be open to it.
Oh my God,
Yeah, we start going.
I mean, Allison's seen my storyboards. They probably
Oh,
look
yours are really bad.
They're
Mine are
like
bad.
worse than 3-year-old people. Like,
Dude, if you ever need me to storyboard, I'm serious.
I might need it because we're gonna be doing this
He'll sit in the room with
COVID
you.
thing.
Right? Yeah.
He'll sit in the room with you and fucking just
Hell yeah, awesome.
you tell him what you want. You like frame it up. He'll take a reference photo and he'll fucking do it, and then he'll just run with it. And like
Awesome.
it looks.
Yeah.
I'll show you some of the ones that he did for me for
yeah,
just this little sketch we did, and it was fucking awesome.
Well, I've seen some of
really
it. He
shut it
posted on
down.
Instagram. I'm just like, wow, dude. I can see that Zach, dude. He's playing guitar, or he's like, get that camera out of my face. I think I saw that one. That one was really good.
Wait, I had one of those.
Wait,
That one was really cool.
That's right. No, it's always a pleasure working with Zach. I call him the director when I don't hang out, when he's not in the same room, just because like he's always in charge of everything. He has like that artistic vision. And I mean, since I'm not in film and I have no idea what the hell I'm doing most of the time, it's good to be around someone who has his feet like really deep into it, because Zach would be like, okay, I want you to do this, and I want it to be in this style, and here's the general framing I want. Interpret it as you will. I trust you, and because he trusts me, like it's a nice
So
dynamic
the big thing
between the two of
about
us.
directing is what I've learned coming from like my high school days. It's like it's not just being in charge. It's like trusting. Well, being good enough to trust other people and like them to actually execute it. Because there's a lot of directors I've met where it's like, okay, they know what they want, but they don't know how to communicate it, or they don't trust their crew to do it, which makes you a bad director, I feel like. And it usually comes out with like people who are unhappy on their set. So like, I mean, I've worked with Zach before, and it's like he's already trusting his crew or his cinematographer and all that stuff, and that was hard for me. Like I still don't trust most camera operators.
Right.
I don't trust. I mean, I was literally complaining about it the other day
Right.
about like someone I worked with. Like they did a pan on a tripod, and it skipped. It skipped, and for a shot that we really needed. And it's like, oh my gosh, all I want is people to be in focus and to do smooth camera movements. But apparently, it's too much to ask. But hopefully I'm getting there where I trust other people. But it's a sign of a good director if you can actually communicate that stuff, because the things that you're really good at are the easiest things you can let go because you're so good at communicating it. So,
But the other, I mean, like, that's one of the hardest things to do, is the trust component of it. But I also, you realize after a while, like, there's a reason why the same people work with the same people, because you build that relationship. And I think that's what makes it almost, for a lot of like young filmmakers and people who are trying to get into it, a lot harder, because you don't have a relationship with those people, and trust is a huge aspect of all of this. I mean, even down to the fact that, like, if you have a set that's somewhat closed, you don't want to let new people on, because it just makes your performers uncomfortable, and it makes people that are working on it uncomfortable. And it's little things like that that you don't think about that make it so much harder for younger people to kind of enter into the industry.
Yeah, first impressions are always we can swear on this thing, right?
Yeah, it's fine. I just had to bleep out.
this ad is sponsored by Squarespace.
Yeah, I imagine you're listening back to this and you're editing, you're cringing really hard right now. So sorry, future Zach.
While I'm sitting over my dinner and editing, I'll be thinking about how easy it was to make dinner with Blue Apron and you
God
too.
fucking damn it!
we're discussing people who are getting into this, and I was wondering, because you guys are all, I would consider all three of you professionals to varying degrees, and like, do you have any advice to people who are first starting out, be it like with cameras, acting? I mean, just like what kind of tenacity do you need to have to
Yeah,
get
Alison,
into?
how do you operate an Alexa?
Wow. I wouldn't know. I mean, like, my background is not in the film world, obviously. I come from the stage world, and so I think it's a very different, like, getting into it is pretty different, and you kind of have to, like, choose your path. To exist in both is a lot harder. And it's not the same set of skills that's required.
Maybe you could talk, like, you have that perspective of like a stage and film background. Like, I know there are a lot of actors and stuff that think they could just like go in between the lines really easily. Maybe you could talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are plenty of people that try, and not to say that it isn't from a very basic sense, like, it is the same thing. You're embodying a character, you're trying to convey emotions, you have a script in the same way. Obviously with film, the biggest shift is that you aren't going on a linear journey per se, and so you have to get into a moment or a character so quickly, and then be able to replicate that a lot of times. Whereas when you're working on stage stuff, you really have the whole journey to experience. And then the other, like, major thing is the fact that on stage, and this is something that I think with the new implementation of technology on stage, a lot of directors are like not sure how to use it and struggling with that, because on stage you really don't have to worry about telling your audience like where to look. That's not you can create moments that sort of direct the eye with the lighting and things like that. But you are creating a full stage picture, and sort of a world to exist, and the audience is allowed to choose whatever adventure they want. Whereas with film, you are the whole window. You're creating that. You are choosing what your audience is going to be able to see. And so for actors, sometimes that means you are getting a major close-up. And so those emotions can't be 10 times what they would be. And so that's the other big shift. And I think the people that are able to recognize the differences and master both of them are really skilled. And there are totally plenty of people that are able to do it. But it is a difference, it's a big difference. And so you see that from people who are so used to being on stage and then are like, well, I'm going to be a film actor, and then jump to film and are, giving way too much.
Yeah. They don't know that nuance.
Yeah.
I was actually on your Discord, movies and filmmaking, which you should totally.
Oh my god, we're not showing my Discord now, are we?
I'm actually going to cut that.
Show my Instagram. I'm just kidding.
Cut just the name.
Cut the audio. cut the audio. But I was talking to Carlo, the guy in Canada, about exactly this thing about like directing theater actors who are coming into film, and it's hard to know where the line is drawn in terms of like their acting is just not as up to snuff, because I think new actors in general just think more theatrically, because they think they're pretending and they have to put on a show for everybody.
Yeah.
Very true.
But I've actually directed people who legitimately came from theater, and a lot of it was just that one is a big volume thing of being aware of where you are literally. Like, you're in a room, and you're in someone's house, so you can be as loud as you want. Who cares? Like, I live here, But whereas if you're in a restaurant and you're like smuggling drugs underneath the table, and someone's like, "Are you trying to stiff me?" Like really awkwardly and loudly, and it's like, okay, that's time and place, buddy. You're trying to do this on the sly, like that kind of awareness tends to. It's because you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but typically on a stage you have to project a little bit more, even though there's miking. Yeah. Even though there's mics, there's theater miking, but like you still have to project a lot more because it's very much a different style of production.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, it can be the difference between like an angle. It could be really like the difference between it. How much would you typically turn your head to look at something on a stage? You would do it in a more exaggerated fashion. And I'm not saying you would do like a giant head movement.
But you do. Like, I mean, as I did theater acting for like 4 years, like I wanted to do a little bit of acting so that I could at least know what the actor's process if I'm ever going to like direct anyone, and it didn't really help as much as I thought it would be, because you like cheating your body towards the stage. You don't do that for film. You like, they do that for you, or they block you, or like projection, like what Zach was talking about. You really have to project. And it's a totally different thing because there's no close-ups on stage.
No.
And close-ups are like what makes and breaks like a film actor's performance. And that just does not exist on
Not yet, but it is happening more.
Oh, with the screens.
With giant LED screens. I'm working on a production right now where we have a giant LED screen, and it's just really funny to watch, to come from this world where, you know, we just worked on this project and I'm surrounded by people who are really familiar with what it is to work with screens and work with film, and then to be in that world where no one knows what they're doing. And it's, you know, I say that generally, and there are certainly some people who are way more skilled than not, but I think it is like a weird process that everyone feels really insecure about what they know, because they're not familiar with working with a big screen on stage.
What was our question? I think we.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
was just about to bring it back. It was about what lessons or one of the questions I actually had just ties directly into Tristan's more specifically, just to kind of rein it in. Are there any lessons you took away from this production, Sleep Hath Its Own World, or even the previous one, which the name escapes me?
Che se può fare.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
Oh, brilliant.
I'm not going to try to say
His
it.
Italian is improving.
Oh my
Love
God.
it. Okay, yeah. Talk about the lessons you learned.
Yeah, so lessons you took away from this. Yeah.
Gosh, we learned a lot.
But more specifically tailoring it to like what you would take to another production, like another film production. Maybe you can make it more specific to like something like what you did, which we're gonna get into that whole thing because it's not typical film. But like more specific to like new filmmakers, what kind of new filmmakers, actors, anybody trying to get into film, what would you take what you learned and what would you say to them?
I think a lot what I learned is pre-production is king. Like always, I think because we had such a difficult situation where we were pretty much blocking the environments and the camera the day of, a lot of kind of problems came from that. And I guess like preparing for that would be better. Also maybe spreading out our production days in a more, I'm not like blaming anyone, obviously. These are very like, this is what I learned.
I don't know. I feel a little attacked right now.
Well, okay. We should not shoot one song a day. And then,
you know,
and then the rest of the third song is split up in 4 days.
You know, we learned a lot.
Okay, that's a big thing I learned.
I think that you're touching on something that it's like a common battle in like larger productions that actually have a proper budget, where like the director is like, okay, well we need like more days, and the producer's like, well you only have 2, or you only have 13 hours. Good luck.
Negative 5 hours.
Yeah, you're actually in debt.
You had to get me the cut yesterday.
I do think like I'm not about to bring out that dark day of the schedule, but I think that there were a lot of like components to that. You know, it was a scheduling thing, and I think beyond all else, like that's one of the things that I learn a great deal on any production that I work on is how to work with the schedule and how to make sure that you fit everything in. And
I think we did a good job.
We have a whole film. So.
That was a 9-minute film shot in 5 days.
If it makes you guys feel any better, it felt like the most organized production I've ever been on, including my own that I produced. So I'm like, and I actually modeled some of what I was doing after because I was. For those who don't know, I was lead gaffer. I was gaffing on this project, and I was watching you guys. Like you had your call sheets, and you didn't just have your call sheets. You had the most wonderful thing of like not only just emailing the call sheets, but you had it texted to people too. And it's like, hey, did you look at the call sheet? Did you look at the call sheet? Did you look at the call sheet?
And then the worst case scenario, you have it on paper and
Yeah.
you shove it in their
Right.
face.
Right.
Yeah, that was the second time I've really used Studio Binder for like a call sheet thing, and
It was so helpful.
It was so nice because then Alison and I could just bounce off like, okay, we need this, we need that. And she can do her thing with contacting people.
I will say though, and I'd be curious to hear your like recent experience like producing and directing. I think it's so much easier to have two people. Like I think like to know like I feel so lucky to have Carlo because I feel like we are capable of a lot together, and the fact that like it's kind of like checks and balances where if you don't have somebody who's looking at that call sheet, there's so much more of a chance for error, and to be able to communicate that with each other, to have two people on set that are kind of beyond just the AD who normally would be sort of a second man, but I think it's really helpful to have two people that are kind of running ship.
It is like super helpful because all the things that I probably did not have time or just like didn't really like have an idea of what to handle was I pretty much all Alison did, like working with Morgan, our choreographer, talking with the actors, making sure wardrobe, all that stuff.
On top of doing the camera moves and making sure your camera rig's ready and working with your
Which
AC.
I would have no
Right.
real idea of what to do, and the lighting, another huge component of it.
And,
that,
and
like,
if I had to produce and do all of that, like
yeah,
it would have just not gone as smoothly as
Yeah.
it did.
That's what seems. Oops, sorry.
Oh, no, go
I
ahead.
was going to say that's what seems like one of the most arduous parts of the whole process. It necessitates some form of collaboration with other people
Yeah.
on set. And so I'm an illustrator. I can sit in front of my sketchbook and do whatever I want, and then boom, I have the picture like all by myself. So, just thinking about working with other people on set, like what's your biggest blunder or like biggest miscommunication?
Gimbal.
Actually, I have something to say about
oh man, there's a lot. Like I
car rig.
I think that
Car rig.
Car
oh my
rig's
gosh,
good, too.
Car rig. Oh.
Or shooting in the coldest day of the year.
Gosh, it's I like all the flashbacks of every single moment that like there was like any sort of spat or anything like that. It's a stressful process, and I think like making sure you learn how to communicate urgency without communicating frustration is something that I am working on and learning, and I think that was like in terms of collaboration that often caused the most frustration is when you're on a set with about a lot of people that you like. You don't want to be an asshole. Pardon my French, but you sometimes have to be. But there's a way to quote unquote be an asshole without actually being like personally offensive to the people that are around you and your team and your partner. There are ways to communicate urgency, and I think that's something that we're working on. And
I mean, it comes with
to
experience.
improve.
It's time and experience. The more you do it, the more that you're like, okay, I've been in this situation before where we have only like an hour and a half to do this. Like, okay, I know how to communicate this well that our location's going to kick us out. Like that is the end all be all. Like that's how it goes. And like, I mean, I understand. I've worked with a lot of people who get angry and all that stuff. And obviously I also have to be an asshole too, because like, we are working with people we like and all that stuff. And it's not like it's personal. Like every time, like one thing I learned in school was your director might yell at you and he might get pissed at you, but after a wrap, he's probably going to have a beer with you. Just how it works. Yeah. It's not personal, it's work.
I think there's like a book title in there, The Art of Being an Asshole.
Oh man. Yeah.
I think, I mean, we learned a lot I mean, for me, I'm always very like, obviously I'm a big guy about cinematography, and we kind of stretch ourselves thin with how we were operating our camera here with the Steadicam gimbal and tripod and handheld and all that stuff. And usually, if you're going to do that, you have 2 or 3 cameras, and we didn't. We had to, and I was just so tired the day before when we had to get the shots in the dance studio that I didn't even balance the gimbal.
Well, and that brings up another point is that like money solves a lot of problems, which is like not a fun thing to hear. And like as a producer, it's like really not a fun thing to hear, but it's like at the end of the day, money does solve a lot of potential problems or prevents things from happening where you have like a holdup because of a camera setup. Having multiple cameras is helpful, but that's money at the end of the day.
Big productions, if they have a red, they usually have another red just in case, because those things break a lot.
Yeah.
And that's not even like a joke. Like literally, if you're going to be shooting with a red camera, most of the time you'll have a backup.
Do you prefer red or Ari?
I've honestly only used a red camera, so I can't really speak for the Aris, but I would like to use a Ari someday.
Well, I've heard a lot about your artistic intent, artistic vision. You seem like the kind of guy who's like, all right, the gear works. All right, let's get to the artistic stuff. Like, who cares? You don't really have like a lot of like commitment to like the technology or the gear. You more prefer.
I think that's a good way of explaining how I see technology. Like it's a tool to get me to what I want to see, pretty much. Obviously, growing up, I was really into gear and all that stuff, but now it's like literally, how do I solve problems so that I can get to the vision that I can get at probably like the lowest price, probably, or will it last or anything like that. Like everything I buy is so that like one, it can help my productions or our productions, even like my friends and stuff. How do we get to like Zach or Alex or any of these people who borrow my gear regularly? Like it's not even like it's just so that I want to buy it. It's like, how can we use it to the best of its ability?
Okay, so I guess I want to come to in say Path Its Own World. There's 3 opera pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, why those pieces, and why? I guess more specifically, or more actually, let me backtrack. More broadly, why this sort of film format for this kind of it to me? Because to me, being on this and seeing it. And seeing what you guys did with the previous project, this sort of seems like art preservation, like art history preservation in a way.
I like that. Yeah. So the project, Che si può fare, so our last project sort of started as I am a huge fan of early music. And that is anything from like Baroque to medieval. A lot of people know madrigal music and stuff like that. But in opera, the early music genre is one that either people are like huge fans of or they absolutely hate. And most commonly, the composer that people think of is Handel. And I'm not going to get into a lecture on Baroque opera, but there is a lot of music that is very, in my opinion, the thematic components of it are very modern. So it's oftentimes about sex, about love, about war, and war from the perspective of like actually warring, or war from just the perspective of like some sort of inner tempest or little familial battle or something like that. It can be whittled down to something really simple. So the themes are really massive, and they can translate to a modern audience, I think, really quite easy. And especially if you strip them from the context of the operas, because the operas are like really contrived a lot of times. And so I had always kind of thought, when the pandemic started, I started seeing a lot of content from companies who were just desperate to put something out, and they didn't really know how to use film. And so there were a lot of people who were like all of a sudden like buying a drone and like just doing a lot. I know, like opera people who just have no idea how to use it, but just like, I'm gonna buy a drone because it looks cool, and then doing just shots like over the water. And like that works, but it only works to a certain point, and you kind of need somebody with more of a foot in the cinematic world and who understands that a lot better. I think one of the other things as like a director is like admitting that you don't know how to do something. It's huge. It's huge to say like, I don't know how to do this. I need people to support me who are smart and capable. So I had said to a friend of mine who was, I reached out to our lute player, and I had said, there's a world in which I'd like to create a project centered around some kind of Baroque song that has themes of isolation or something like that. And it would be shot in my hometown, and if I can, get some people involved, but it could be really cool. And I think that there's a way to take a really simple song with a simple theme, and to create a visual world that is engaging and then kind of encompasses the cinematic world, brings people who aren't opera fans involved because the music is compelling, but also bridges the Baroque world with a lot of people who are also just as passionate as film people, but about their art. And so then I sent a really long email to Carlo.
It's really long.
A really long email. I tend to do that. I tend to
talk in
stalk
paragraphs.
people. Well, I tend to stalk people on social media, and Carlo we had a mutual friend that he had worked with on a project, so I had seen some of his work. And I kind of just stalked him and then sent him a really long, I will fully admit it, I've done it to multiple people. I mean, we wouldn't have Morgan, our choreographer, had I not done that exact same thing, but, or even our lute player. So I sent him an email and was like, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks, visiting my family, because I went to school on the East Coast and sort of live out there. And I said, do you want to meet for coffee? And we'll just talk about it. And so we did. And at the end of our coffee meeting, we were like, let's do it. So that was our first project. And we, with that, reached quite a lot of people. It had a wonderful response. And one of those people was the artistic director of Early Music Now, which is a Milwaukee Baroque organization that sort of focuses on giving free concerts to the community of early music concerts, and they do attract a great international basis, some phenomenal Baroque artists to Milwaukee, but they were struggling because they didn't have concerts that they were able to put out to their audience base and to their subscriber base, and so they saw our project and were like, well, we would love to fund that. Gave us a little bit of money.
A little bit. Yeah.
Little bit of money. And I also had received a grant to put together something as well. So, and that's how we sort of got, this whole project together. And in terms of the music itself, all 3 of the songs are about sleep. I really love to, and I've been sort of a nerd about this for most of my life, but I'm a great fan of Shakespeare and classical theater as well. And I find it really interesting to create sort of collages of music or collages of text that are poetic collages that center around a theme. It's something that you can do really cool with Shakespeare text. And so when I was a kid, I would do that. And so it's the same thing with Baroque arias. You can kind of find the ones that connect to each other. And this one just happened to be about sleep. And I strung all those pieces together. And then after talking to Carlo, we created a narrative that went along with this idea of if this is a person who is sleeping, or if this is a person who's compelled to sleep, what is the world of their dreams? And that's kind of what these songs ended up being.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I think the title of the podcast is going to be Art History Hath Its Own World. To play on the words. But yeah, that's actually really cool to kind of see that, because I've always wanted to do I call them in my head mood pieces. Yeah. So I've always I like to make music, so I like to make synthwave and rock and all that, all sorts of stuff. But I thought it would be really cool if you just set some really gritty, dirty tone of isolation and loneliness and a night cityscape, and somebody voiceovering just talking about lost love interest or something like that, and then you see them walking through the neon and it's raining, and just kind of what you're talking about, a collage of just a mood, just not even there's no story, there's no something to learn. It's just there's something to commiserate with, there's something to feel empathy with. And I kind of that's kind of what I saw when I saw when Carlo asked me to help you guys come on do the thing, and I saw your previous piece. I'm like, okay, that's literally what I wanted to do with just a normal piece of music, but it's its own.
Well, I think what's really big for me is that a lot of this art one would call like inaccessible. They would say, and I think if I like handed Carlo a bunch of Baroque songs without the context of the projects that we've done, like I don't know that you'd feel compelled to like listen to them or really like dig deep into them.
Probably not.
We're working on it. We're getting there. He's going to be a big Baroque fan by the end of this.
Train him up.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think when you boil it down to exactly what you're saying, sort of a mood or a theme that is relatable beyond the song itself, then suddenly you say, well, this is about, isolation. And with our last piece, people are like, oh, I can kind of hear that in the music. I can kind of hear that it feels very lonely or simple in that way. And that's the connection that you want to make. Like as the person who's obsessed with it, you like really deeply just want to get people, like hook them just a little bit, and then that kind of draws them in. But the title of the project, Sleep Hath Its Own World, is based on a poem, which is it's Dreams by Lord Byron, and there's a sort of reoccurring phrase, "Sleep hath its own world." Really great poem. And in our preview, we had a friend of mine who's an actor read some of the text.
I listened to that.
Yeah. So it's I'm like a classical art nerd, and so I'll try and like pull it in and make it relevant and bring it to new audiences as much as I can.
That's really, really cool. I guess, Carlo, to kind of bring it to you, when you were kind of approached by Alison with this project, and you got this gigantic novel of an email, and you're like,
very much of a novel.
My question is like, when you were approached by Alison, what what intrigued you about it, and what about it resonated with you? Because I know you're kind of selective on what you'll take on.
I thought it was an interesting kind of proposal for a project, because I'm not like super into classical music or anything, but I did theater. I was very familiar with it. I enjoyed theater, and I played trumpet for a number of years, so I was familiar with some classical music and stuff, and I always had like a little bit of interest in it, and like I did not know anyone else who was doing something like that, and I thought it was kind of interesting of how Alison pitched it, and I thought it would be kind of an interesting thing to tell visually, because that's the thing, is Alison brings this very like a lot of knowledge from like classical art and stuff, and I kind of am like the opposite of that, where I bring in like my film and like more of a modern kind of look at things. So I just thought it'd be kind of fun. Also, like it kind of landed on a very specific week in the summer where I literally had nothing going on. Like that was like a big thing, was that I was like, if you asked me the week before, I would have been on a shoot almost every day. So very lucky, maybe just like fate, but I thought that it was a really unique thing, and that's kind of why I wanted to do it.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this thing, and there's really like a nice dreamlike quality to it. I felt like it was in the middle of a reverie, and I like the iridescence of all the lighting. And I know that you did that.
Well, so to kind of, and I'm going to explain this just so that you know, but also because I think it's also a faux pas that people think like they either have like they think the gaffer just does what they're told, or like they think that they literally designed the whole lighting thing. It's definitely a collaboration.
It's a collaboration between your cinematographer and gaffer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you rely on your gaffer to figure out what kind of lighting you want, or it's really dependent on your cinematographer. This is kind of like both, where we had a very set in pre-production of what the look we wanted for each section of the pieces, and I just communicated that to our gaffers during our production.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I thought it was beautiful nonetheless. I mean, like, whatever's behind it aside. And, it was like there's a solitude in there that I really empathize with. I think this is like the most propitious moment that there is for a film like that, because, the pandemic and everything, we're always inside. We're not going out as much. And like I particularly related to the scene where he has his MacBook open. He's just, looking almost bored with himself. Like, what the hell is my life? Until it kind of unleashes it into something else.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something that almost felt transcendental about that particular scene, and I was wondering like what exactly inspired that, the composition of that, like.
What specifics?
Yeah, like what I'm trying to phrase the question right. Sorry, if you want to.
No, it's okay. Because I have a question that's tertiary to that. So I had a question more specifically about, because like one of the opening scenes, besides like the I should say shots, not scenes, it's all one scene kind of thing, right? But like the opening shot, or one of the opening shots, is in the movie theater, and like we're seeing like them dance in the Avalon, right? The Milwaukee Avalon. And there's a projector screen of like him asleep. And like it's a very obvious metaphor. It's an obvious visual metaphor. Like he's dreaming, but like he's really, it's not really happening. He just in a food coma from Chinese food, watching watching Netflix originals he's already seen 12 times.
Yes, that's it.
Something
The,
about
the Office for the 50th time.
Yeah. But like, what visually, what inspired that particular scene?
I always thought that there had to be a moment in the project that kind of hinted at the fact that he was still asleep, and I was just kind of obviously this project is very much inspired by La La Land, and I wanted to reference La La Land in many ways in this project, and one of them was I love that scene in La La Land where me and Sebastian meet in the movie theater, and one of the shots is she's like in front of the movie screen, and like the light is wrapping around her face from the projector. Obviously, it's not a huge like one-to-one copy of what they did, but taking that, I'm like, I would love to shoot in a movie theater and kind of reference that in a way. It kind of turned into this like, oh, what if we reference that he's asleep and he's in this other world through the projector, and that's like obviously a window, and it's always up to interpretation with our kind of projects of like we don't know, because even just hearing people watch this stuff, like once they see it, they're like, wait, is that him? Like that's him asleep, but is this happening? And then it's like, it's those questions that we want to ask. So it's a lot of my projects, I have very specific films that I absolutely love, and I would love to reference them in my own projects, but they're always homages, but they're not one-to-one copies, obviously. But it kind of came from that of like more meet cute style things that we were referencing. So
kind of a piggyback question for that. I think it's because the goal of the podcast, kind of stepping away from like the question for a second. The goal of this podcast is one, to just discuss what people are doing, and people that I've worked with, people I haven't worked with, but like just discussing what people are doing and why they're doing it the way they're doing it on a no to micro budget level, because I feel like there's not enough love in that space for what people are doing, especially with stuff like this, which is it feels like it has so much production value to it, even though I was literally there and I knew what we were using. So like it really didn't have that much, but it felt like it. And that's like, to me, that's like, I guess that's a credit to you guys, that you're planning and the production of everything, even though you said that it could have been better, but like,
always,
but like, even though, it was what it was, it turned out to be such a great thing. And I guess to kind of call back to what you're talking about, like an homage, like all your films have an homage. I kind of find myself doing that too. Like I have like, to me, it's almost like an anchoring point of like, okay, this is where someone's been before. From a new filmmaker perspective, I feel like a lot of people kind of crawl up their own ass about like trying to make something so unique and like no one's ever seen this before, and like it's got to have all the psychological metaphors and philosophy and Nietzsche and whatever. Like what I guess if you could talk to like a new filmmaker or just even a new artist, let's even take film out of the equation. Tristan, you feel free to answer too, like, because I want to include you, but at the same time you have like all this illustrative stuff to you, like and art history too, like classical art as well. What would you say to a new artist who like feels that way about a certain kind of way about their ego and like trying to make something unique?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I think it always comes back from like directing is great when you do it from what you know. And that's the thing, is a lot of these things I reference, it's like I know it inside and out and I know the emotion behind it, but I'm not trying to copy it. It's a homage. It's like I respect this scene or filmmaker or director, and I think people got to realize, like when you're starting out, you should try things, but don't get so caught up in the fact that it needs to be amazing or great or anything along those lines. Because I mean, for me, when I first started, all my things were terrible. They were garbage, Call of Duty or like the Shining references, or like honestly, they were all just terrible like copies of things that like I was not at all prepared to try to imitate at all. But over time, just doing my thing, having fun, I got to the point where it's like, okay, I have my own voice. Like I could take a La La Land scene and make it my own. I think for new filmmakers or new artists, you should do it. Do it every day because you love it. And if you do it every day, you're going to get good at it. So I think it's just, repetition. Like I'm kind of rambling, but no, it's just you have to build up to your voice. You don't just get it right.
It takes time and an investment of blood, tears, and sweat.
Correct.
All that jazz.
I think it's very easy to get up your own ass about this sort of thing. You're like, I'm creative, suck my dick, I'm an artist. And you're like, all right, yeah, I get you, dude. And I was sort of like that when I was, when I was in high school, because like I drew and I was like one of the best artists in my high school class. And times I have to stress high school, okay?
Yeah.
Like that's a lot different.
See, I understand that.
Right. And so
I was like, I was the best filmmaker in my high school.
Right.
Yeah, there's
I'm
not
sure.
much competition.
But yeah, exactly. There's that. And so, I'm a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design. I don't know if you know who Seth MacFarlane is. Seth MacFarlane went to that school and like he was fucking incredible. But the thing is, like, that is the top design institution in the United States. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna be the best there. I'm gonna be the number one illustrator like that no one's ever seen before. And I mean, I get on campus and everybody can draw just as or like I can't even fathom how much better than me. And so when you're around that for 4 years, you're like, holy shit, I'm not that good. I got to start working my ass off here. And so something that I learned from that is, obviously have some drive in yourself, but you have to surround yourself by people who are a lot better at your craft than you are. And you have to steal from them. I mean, like I was one of the worst artists. My foundation year, I was one of the worst artists in my drawing class. But like I used to, we have these little breaks in between drawing sessions and I would walk around the room and just kind of like lick, like we call it like licking the painting, licking the drawing, where you're just going so close so you can see the details of what the other artists are putting on their work, and you have to take from that and put it in your own stuff because with time, like the accumulation of learning from everybody around you makes you a more well-rounded artist. And the most like there was one person like back in high school who refused to look at other people's work because there's like I don't want it to influence my own stuff, and I'm like that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I mean, yeah, everything that you're saying is so on point with that because I think at the end of the day, everyone is going to have some sort of point of reference. And so anyone that saw our piece goes, okay, dancing, movie screen, like, okay, maybe La La Land, but then could also ascribe it to a whole other film or put something else on it that we didn't even know or think of. But that's where people
happened all the
come.
time. Yeah.
That's where that's how we as humans sort of respond to these things. We know what we know, and then we look at things and we have a sort of schema for like, is this something I know? Is this something that's new to me? Like I can identify the object because it's similar to what I know. And so at the end of the day, like, yes, you have to use other things as a point of reference. I'm sure most people that start off illustrating are doing some cartoons that they've seen or some animation that they've seen, something that they saw as a kid, like a TV show that they watched. Like that's how people start. And it doesn't mean that you are going to be copying the things that other people do. It's actually, I think, the way to build your own voice is to start from a place of what you know or what you've seen and then see how your voice will morph that into something different.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys would agree with this saying, but like hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say that like No, not that specifically, but something very close. It's like I have hard work and passion, and that's
Yeah.
a pretty
Oh, that
dangerous
shows
combo.
in you, man. You're like
Yeah.
you're always on it. I see your Instagram story. I'm like, wait, when is this guy not doing something?
That's why literally one of my
Right.
friends.
Does not.
Yeah,
Right.
my friends
Stop.
commented. He's like, "Do you
Right.
ever stop grinding, bro?" And
Like,
I'm
yeah.
like, "You can stop."
Right. And some people might say like, oh, there's such thing as toxic productivity, but I look at that, I'm like, good for that, because
Toxic productivity.
I've-
Where's
I've-
some of that? I want some of that.
yeah. I have this problem where I tend to judge people on their accomplishments through life. I know it's like it's not good. It's like a subconscious thing. It's like, wow, you're artistic and you have like this sort of background. Like I respect the drive that you have, as opposed to like somebody who, I don't know. I mean, there are people who just want to relax and watch Netflix and live a more simple lifestyle that maybe I wouldn't understand, but because like there's that inner motivation to do like great things. I mean, even if I never do great things, the motivation is there. And like when I see that in another person like you or you, Zach, I'm like, it motivates me to continue like creating and I don't know, never stopping.
And that's cool to hear, because I always feel like I work super hard, and it comes from like kind of this fear of like it's because I immigrated from the Philippines. It's like if someone else, like, it's so hard to get out of the Philippines, and it's so fucking terrible there. All right, like, it is not a good place to live, and I'm so lucky to be living in the U.S. even with all the problems that the U.S. has. But it's like I see all of my cousins and all my family back in the Philippines, and they're doing amazing stuff with photography and art and math and all that stuff. And it's like, well, if I don't work my ass off here, it's like they could have been here and made it even better. Like they could have gone even farther. So it's like I feel like it's a responsibility on me to work as hard as I can so that I could make them proud, and that like the spot here in the US wasn't like wasted. I feel like that's kind of a big driving motivator for me.
So when did you come to the U.S. then?
I was 8.
You were 8. Okay.
2006. Yeah.
Okay. Man, 2006.
Yeah, that's been a long time ago.
That's the start of the digital age, essentially, when everything went. Like, when did the iPhone come out? 2007.
Yeah,
Long
yeah,
topic,
something like
but
that.
whatever. Yeah, it's good times.
Yeah, it's a whole ass topic. Because I started going to high school in 2006. 2006 was my freshman year in high school, and let me tell you, iPods and everything, and then
I had a
touches.
shuffle.
Oh, yeah.
The shuffle.
Shuffle was the best. All right, all
I
the
still
others
have
suck.
it somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
All the other iPods sucked.
Everyone talking about how their computers f***ed by LimeWire and Kazaa and stuff like that.
Oh, because they're dumb.
Yeah.
Sorry, like back when I was a kid, I had a computer and I made an email and all this stuff. I was like the tech guy. Like even in the Philippines, like I would fix the computer and stuff. I think that's always been like a nature of me. But
yeah.
I always told people that they were stupid for like downloading anything from LimeWire.
I used to think I was like the smartest person in the room when I was in high school. So like, I don't even have an antivirus. I don't need one.
That I was not doing because I was scared I'd break my parents' computer.
Oh, I still broke my computer.
Yeah.
Still got viruses. That
I just wanted to play
arrogance.
RuneScape.
I guess I did want to ask more technical stuff. Like why did you use a Steadicam versus like a gimbal? I know you used a gimbal for one of the shots, but like why Steadicam? Why movement at all? Why not a dolly? Why not handheld? Why specifically the cinematography?
Carlo's the Steadicam master.
Yeah. Yes, he
Apparently
is.
I am. So a big thing for me is I think cutting is obviously manipulation of time. If you're cutting between shots, it feels like you're kind of going in a rapid succession. And I think long shots, it brings you more into the world because you're not cutting. You're more immersive. You're seeing it happen in real time. There's no cutting. There's no manipulation. And since we're dealing with dance, it was a big thing of when we were in the pre-production phase that I emphasized, I don't want this to be a dance film. I want a story to be told by the dance. I want movement. I want different environments, because then they're progressing in a linear fashion. It's not just dancing for dancing's sake. And that was something I communicated even on day of. It's like, okay, for the David Barnett gallery, like there was going to be a moment where we only were going to shoot in that first room. Where like he goes up the stairs and it was like, no, we can't do that, because we have to show that this dance is a dialogue rather than just they're dancing. Because for me, as a person who does not dance or listen to Baroque music, I need an anchor for that linear progression. And how do you show that? Movement of the camera, movement of your characters. So it was very important for me that we use the Steadicam because it has this flowing kind of feel to it rather than a very
organic.
It feels like it's operated by someone, which is a big deal. While gimbal feels like a robot is operating it, which is great for certain situations, but I always love the Steadicam look. It brings back that like classic Hollywood movement. So that was why I really was like, we need to use the Steadicam for all these shots, because when he's in his dream world, it's like there's no manipulation. This is what he's feeling. And we're going with him in this linear fashion of all these locations and stuff. So,
and one of the things that I think that like was very successful in the final product was that the Steadicam shots happen once we get to that dream world. It is like a new sort of vocabulary comes about, cinematically speaking, and I think that's really crucial when you're trying to tell a story, is saying, okay, what is the vocabulary for this first section? You know, what are the kind of shots that we're showing? How are they being framed? Obviously, color is a huge component of that, and lighting is a huge component of that. But creating, especially with the linear narrative, the pathway to something that is different. By the end, there's a very different vocabulary color-wise. There's a very different vocabulary with the way that the shots are filmed, the way that things are set up. And so there really does feel like a journey throughout the entire 9-ish minutes, which is pretty crucial.
Yeah, there's obviously a very intentional way that we move the camera between all the different sections of the songs to show. Yeah,
because otherwise, it wouldn't, you'd get 9 minutes of different variations of the same thing. And I think that would generally be pretty boring for an audience. And especially if they don't have that sort of ability, I think you put it really nicely, of like being able to say, oh, I can see the difference between these shots, and that's my window in, because I'm not, a dancer. I'm not a musician that studies Baroque music.
And that's something I brought onto the production that I was very vocal about. It's like this is really cool, this is really artistic and great, but like how would like a average audience member like connect with the story and or recognize that story? So, and
our choreographer, Morgan Williams, who works with Water Street Dance, he was really wonderful in being able to, in the moment, shift a lot of things, because the process of working with dance was not an easy one.
Well, it's fun to see,
but it was not an easy one, and particularly because of the timeline that we were working on, with it being so fast and there not being a ton of pre-production and a ton of rehearsals, which I think would have been very helpful.
Yes.
And that's another thing where you learn that, like, if you're going to use dance, you do need like
a camera
maybe
rehearsal,
a week of rehearsals. But with the timeline that we had and the way that we were shooting and the way that our dance was coming on and their schedule, it was what it was. And in the moment, we were able to make those changes. And that could not have been done if it hadn't been like the three of us. There were so many times, like, especially on that first day, where the three of us were like, everybody else get out of the room. We need to talk. We need to talk about what is changing, what needs to happen, how we're going to achieve that. And then adjustments were made. And had it only been one of us, or had it only been one director with the choreographer who's also producing and shooting, like, it would not have happened. That's a huge thing that I at least saw throughout the process, was that the collaboration
was amazing between all three like directors in a way.
Yeah, it definitely felt like you guys needed just the amount of people for the mental bandwidth to handle what you were handling, but also the collaboration, like knowing the film world, knowing like the music and the intent of your overall piece, and then Morgan with the dance, and all those feeding into each other. But besides itself, you also need like the mental bandwidth of three people to properly
that's a big thing. We've talked about it, like that mental space of like, you have like a mental bar, and like if someone's asking a dumb question, like someone's going to fill that up a little bit.
And like when we were doing the short film that I felt that every minute of the day. I'm like, if someone asks me another dumb fucking question, I'm gonna fucking blow.
I mean,
I'm
that's
I'm
why.
gonna implode, and it
Yeah.
has nothing to do with my personal feelings
Yeah.
about the person. It has nothing to do with like even my own tolerance for stress. It's literally just like you're trying to
Right.
do so much mentally, and
Mhm.
like I didn't understand that when I was thinking, oh, I'm gonna direct my own shorts. And,
Yeah, I
like
mean,
it's totally fine because I like it. Or I should say I love it, but.
yeah, the process of hearing a question on set is you have to hear it, then process it, then realize it's a question that's for someone else, and then you have to tell them how much time was just wasted on that one question.
And not only that, you have to stop what you're already thinking
Yep.
about or doing, because you might have something in your hand. You got a mission. And you're like, I have to do this because someone else can't do it.
Correct.
And then someone stops you. Then you have to like reprocess. Okay, you need this. You need to find Mitch, our sound guy, because he's the one who's doing all that. And then like, oh, I can't find Mitch. Where's Mitch? I'm like, all right,
Yep.
let me find Mitch, and then I forget why I have like a
The
receiver
thing
in
in
my
your-
hand.
in
Yeah,
your hand,
or like
yeah.
where'd my field monitor go? I don't
Yep.
know how many times I asked where the hell is my iPad,
Yeah.
which had my script annotations and.
It was just in your hand.
But that's also, I mean, assistants are crucial. And as a person who, in my professional life, I spend a lot of time working as an assistant because sort of how the pathway of becoming a director is you work as an assistant a lot of times and then you work your way up. But assistants are crucial, and good assistants and assistants you can trust and people that you know are going to get a job done and will only come to you if a question is something that they cannot answer or feel like you need to hear. That's so important.
Having someone else to kind of be there to help filter out the unnecessary, so you
Yeah.
can just focus on what you need to do.
Right.
That's really one. It's validating to hear for myself, but also I think it's going to be really helpful for other people to hear that who are new to the thing, who aren't even directors, or who aren't producers, or who act in, or maybe who are on smaller crews where there is just the director, producer, writer. That's one person, all of that one person, and they're also paying for the whole thing, and then they're also.
I learned that a lot. The short that I shot over the summer until this day. There are a lot of we always had debriefs at the end of
Which is debuting at the Milwaukee Film Festival, right?
No,
Oh.
we don't know yet.
Oh,
We-
okay.
We don't know, but we want to do Sleep Path Its World
I'll cut that out.
for the Milwaukee Film Festival.
Oh, that'd be
But,
really cool. It's
Yeah.
coming up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's a work in progress.
it's a work in progress, but
a lot of people involved.
a big thing about it was like things that criticisms that were given to me as a director were things that like I could not handle because I was the director, AD, and producer. I wasn't the cinematographer, but still, like, I was doing a lot of setting up shots. So it's like whenever you try to judge a director, if there is no producer, AD, or anything like that, you have to see that like they're doing 4 jobs that is usually reserved for 3, 4, 5, 6 different people. So it's a big deal.
And it's also like a thing that I think is really empowering when you are younger and you're like coming up or you're just learning is that like typically the connotation with assistant is like you're somebody's bitch or something like that. You know, you're not the main guy, but an assistant is so important. An assistant is make or break a production. So sometimes like I would even consider you being one of the most important people if you're an assistant. And in film, that actually I think translates a lot more than it does in other art forms where I think people have certain ideas of what actually an assistant does, especially in the theatrical world. An assistant is oftentimes sort of a throwaway job, but in film, you know, that is an understood thing. An AD, a first AD, is really doing a lot of the work. But even, you know, if you are an assistant in any capacity, you are so important, and you are actually like the gears of making everything work.
Yes, totally.
Color palette, because you talked about color being really important. The color of the wardrobe. I'm assuming the color of obviously the lights, but like the color of the locations. Like, did that ever play into, or did you mostly use the locations as they were and kind of paint that with set deck and lighting?
I'll let you take this, but I would say that with a lot of our locations, we were not able, well, not a lot of them, but with some of our locations, it really was like there wasn't much we could do. There wasn't much we could change, which was great in some respects. But in others, it really meant that lighting had to play a huge role.
And wardrobe.
And wardrobe, for sure.
Yeah, I think when we were planning the last stage of, well, I think all of our locations had a purpose. Like, we know what we wanted, which is art gallery or a Villa Terrace, I think, was always just on the docket, and we wanted a movie theater. So all these locations, like, they didn't specifically have like a very specific color palette, but it just kind of worked out that they all did. But we were going to tell most of the story through lighting, to kind of make sure that that color palette is something that's consistent in the third song, and obviously the first song is just mostly done through lights, that color palette and color grading. So we chose it because obviously different colors have different kind of
inherent meanings to them.
Meanings to them. And the first song was obviously very, very cool. A very cool kind of palette of like greens and teals and blues and all that stuff. And the white balance is more towards that blue kind of feel. And then as soon as you get to the third song, a completely different feel of the color is present with the wardrobe and all that stuff. And yeah, that's kind of why we chose it. Very much inspired by Suspiria. I also liked how they lit Joker with their apartment. I'm not saying that Joker is the end all be all, but the cinematography of that film is really good. And just other films that like had really good color palettes. We had a mood board and all that stuff that we referenced. So really, really important color for this project.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we can wrap it up there, but I just wanted to thank you guys for coming to the first official Night Shift podcast.
Like, comment, subscribe.
Like, comment,
subscribe for more content.
You're listening to the Night Shift Podcast.
Well, that was a really fun conversation. I can't say I'm super surprised by like the answers that we got on the questions I had, because I've talked with Carlo while he was editing this, and I've actually kind of gotten some of these things from him already, like the colors and all is inspiration for it being really heavily tied to La La Land, but
and the Baroque period in Alison's case, that surprised me.
I didn't know any of that stuff.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
probably should have. It's really interesting how the Baroque period is like one of the few times in both art and music history that it's you use the same term to describe that period, because like there's the Renaissance, but I don't think I remember learning that in school. I think like during the Renaissance, the terms that you would use technically would be like Renaissance music. It's something else, but like there's Baroque art and then there's Baroque music.
Oh, and they mean the same
And
time
yeah,
period?
it's the same time period.
Oh,
Yeah. And so
okay.
like it's interesting because I don't know too much about Baroque music, but I mean, you know, like Bernini, the sculptor who, tried beating Michelangelo.
Oh, sure.
In the sixth. It was the 17th century. Yeah. But I was going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm like, maybe it's a little off topic. But either way, I was like, yes, this is my bread and butter. So.
Yeah. I hope you got a lot out of like hearing like how a lot of the technical stuff. For all those listening, Tristan is very new to film. He's only been doing this for like a month now.
Not even, man.
Not even.
No.
But you're an artist in your own right, so I feel like it's not super new to you to like a lot of the stuff. That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of film is a very collaborative art form.
Right.
That's the whole point of it. Like the point of it is to bring other people's strengths to bolster the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a culmination of the auditory and the visual and
Right.
the storytelling, right? All these things that we as humans culturally care about, right? Coming together in one wonderful symphony of stuff.
Right.
That makes something really stupid as like Super Troopers.
Super
But also like things as amazing as like The Shining and 2001: A Space Odyssey and all these things, like all those things coming together to like make visual poetry. And I wanted you, and I also want other people who are newer to film, who maybe are thinking about filming something or have filmed stuff, but like are really not, they're really not sure what they're doing, or they feel like they're not sure what they're doing. A lot of film is collaborative. And if you're doing it all by yourself, you're kind of missing out on the whole point of it.
Right. There's a whole myriad of media through which you can express abstract ideas, and it depends on how you define art. I mean, I know some people just think of a guy who's holding a paintbrush and making paintings, but no, I mean, like, as long as you're finding a way to just get those ideas out so that people can interact with it, that's enough for me to consider it like in art form. And also, because it's creative expression, it doesn't really matter what the medium is. I can still communicate with people who make film pretty easily, and understand what they're talking about.
Because
right?
you deal in a visual medium, right? And that translates. That's why we work so well. I think that's why we work so well together, is because I can just literally say, like, I'm thinking of this kind of framework, and you're like, oh yeah,
I got it.
This reminds me of this painter or whatever the and I'm like, yeah, sure. I saw I saw it in the Matrix once. It was pretty cool. It seems kind of lowbrow, and if you look at it from that angle, but like at the same time, I think that's the beauty of film, is that it's because it's a culmination of all these things, it lends itself to being accessible. And I think that's what they were, and that's pretty much exactly what Alison said that she was trying to go for when she kind of conceptualized the idea for this. Is Sleep Hath Its Own World is like the culmination of all these opera pieces, these three opera pieces. And she didn't mention it in the podcast, but she mentioned it while we were doing this, that like I think one or two of these, or maybe even all three of the opera pieces, were pieces that hadn't been recorded in like 60, 70, 80 years or something like that. Like they're just like, and that's kind of why the title of the podcast is Art Preservation Hath Its Own World, because it really does have its own, like she's talking about early music now, that group in Milwaukee that's trying to, like, that's kind of what they're doing. They're preserving art history in a way.
Pretty conservative.
And I think modernizing it with film is kind of like what that does. It makes it accessible.
Yeah. I mean, like you and I discussed this maybe like 2 weeks ago or so, but you got to find a way to make art that matches the zeitgeist, something that speaks to your time, because 50, 100, 3 centuries from now, who are going to be the people who make it into the textbooks? The people who kind of changed the game. They represented something that was happening in their era that wasn't in others. Yeah. And I think that's really important. I wonder how you feel about that. But they're modernizing the music and making it like 2021, even though it was written in like 1940 or whatever.
To your question of like making art that kind of speaks to your current time, your current culture, and that, I don't think there really is an option around. I don't think you can really get around doing that, because the French critic, literary critic and film critic, Roland Barthes, talked about this in his paper, which everyone's heard, but I don't think most people have read it. And you should read it. It's not a long read. The paper...
Death of the Artist, is that it?
Death of the Author.
Death of the Author.
Death of the Author. And, that sort of concept of whether or not does the art transcend itself when it's perceived by an audience? Similar to like how if a tree falls in the middle of the woods but no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Like that kind of idea of like your audience and who you're making it for and how it's interpreted, that sort of idea, isn't really something you get to control. You don't get a say in whether or not the art transcends you or not. It's like a force. I feel like, because a lot of people will talk. I'm going to get on a rant, a little bit of a rant here, but like
Zach Braddy style.
But like a lot of people will say and talk about Death of the Author as if it's something they get to choose a stance on, like it's a political stance on something, because people like to talk about people who've done really bad things, but like and then because of that they like basically ignore that their art ever existed. But like on a massive scale, you don't get to decide that. In a historical context, you don't decide what gets preserved and what's not. The people as a whole do, and that's a force. That's not a decision. So like I'm saying this to kind of bring it around to answer your question. Roland Barthes in that paper talks about how we are not people in a world, right? We're not people first and then the world happens, right? The culture doesn't come from people. People come from culture. So to quote him specifically, I think he says, we're not a people in a world where we are a people of the world. So like, right. So like, you don't get to decide if you're going to make something in the zeitgeist or not. You inherently are the zeitgeist. You are created by said zeitgeist. Like your interests, your hobbies. When you go on Reddit and you see like all these different social media posts, or you go to Facebook, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like you see the memes, you laugh at those memes, right? Well, that's a zeitgeist. That's part of the zeitgeist. You're not deciding that happens. You're participating in something that already exists with or without you. You die, that stuff's still there, and it organically, holistically, changes. All this to say, I don't think you get to decide whether or not you make something that's important to your time or not. I think reaching into the past is a part of that, because you can look at our branding, the night shift. 80s is hell, right?
Right.
It's 80s synthwave, all that jazz. Why? I'll tell you why. Because I like the 80s, all right?
Yeah.
I love it. I love that stuff. But guess what's hot right now? Guess what's hot? Guess what